Hey everyone, this is Vampy, and today we are going to do something really awesome for you. We have a 5-part masterclass about one of my favorite subjects, and that is cosplay armor. Yes, I can talk about this subject forever, but I condensed it for you in 5 different parts so it's easily digestible. And a lot of these tips, remember, you can take some, you don't have to take any, but I really, really hope that you can take some of the tips that I give you on these videos that can give you the courage to tackle any project that you have in the future. The first thing I wanted to go over is obviously how to narrow down your cosplay. I'm sure if you are a fan of a lot of series, the same as me, I really, really love a lot of series. And for me, it's always really, really hard to just focus on one. I like to just go over all of the different things that I have to keep in mind when I first start a costume. So those things I'm going to go over right now. Pricing. A lot of people don't talk about money, but making costumes is very expensive, and that's the reality. It could be, cheaper, but a lot of times if we don't take into account how much money we're going to be kind of investing in our projects, then we will never know if we'll ever finish the project because it could be very expensive. So I think being mindful of finances is number one after you choose your project. Even before you choose your project, thinking about how much things cost. I think research is definitely very, very important, and we can go over that a little bit later. But when you're choosing your first costume, I always want to say it's up to you. A lot of times, if you hear from other people, which I really want you guys to focus on yourselves, because I think that's the most important thing. What do you want? I do want to emphasize, if you want to make a project out of like cardboard when you first start out, that's okay. If you want to save some money, I think that's really great because it's a great starter. A lot of times people always say, oh, you should just do a costume that you really love. I do agree with that. But you don't always have to know the anime. I think that's something that a lot of enthusiasts talk about, and people who are fans of certain series. I'm a strong believer, if you think a project is just fun and you want to just do it, I think go for it. So I think having the courage to cosplay a certain character is the biggest thing. For me, the way I kind of distinguish between what I should start out with is what I'm most passionate about. A lot of times when I'm looking through a list of costumes, I always ask myself, will I continue with this project even after the anime or manga or game kind of dies out? Because that momentum that you bring into a project, you want to keep it throughout the whole time. Because once you lose that, I guess, spark or passion, it kind of diffuses everything else. So I think that you have to keep that in mind if you really want to continue with a big armor project, because it is a lot of time and a lot of money. It could be a lot of money, and just time is like the most important thing. So I really want to emphasize that. Really make sure that this is a project that you feel like you can invest time to. Also, weighing out your options, which I talked about before. I think making sure that it's something that you can learn skills from. I think a lot of people go into armor projects and they don't really think about the skills because they're like, oh, I'm going to do this. But you know what? You're going to learn a lot of things. So just keep in mind, if you mess up, that's part of the process. It's okay to mess up. And as long as you accept that, you're going to do really, really well. Because every project from then on, you're just going to get a lot better. So I promise you, if you do mess up, don't be intimidated to step back, take a break, and come back to it. So I think that also being reasonable with your finances is a huge one. I know that when I first started cosplay, I really wanted to make, for example, a Gundam costume. This was like a few years ago. And I did not realize how expensive it could have been, or it could be, until I started. And then I had to wait months and months later because I didn't factor in how much everything costed. So I think that as long as you have like a timeline of finances, I think that's great to do. And this is where I have to bring in a notebook. When you're figuring out any cosplays, you always want to get a notebook like this. I got mine for only $2 at Target, and you don't have to spend a lot of money, but I highly recommend getting a notebook that has, of course, like enough paper. If you have a gridded one, that's great. And have little folders in them so you can have little notes for yourself or even sketches. Sketching out your whole project, I think, helps a ton. A lot of times we go into projects and we're just like, okay, I'm just going to go do it. And then cut out the materials and everything. I think that is number one, something I did before, and it really costed me a lot of time in the long run. So making sure that you're doing a lot of research before you start. One of my favorite things to do, and I always mention this on my streams, is that I have my cell phone or my iPad full of images. Full of images of my costume that I'm going to make. For example, this one is a Scarlet Nexus costume that I have coming up, and I always have it in front of me when I wake up, look at my phone. I also have a dream board. I know that sounds a little bit extensive and that's a lot of work, but if it's not in front of you, I think it kind of like from day to day, you forget about projects happening. So if you're reminded in front of your face often, you remember to possibly look for materials, get inspired again, and also it reminds you to maybe while you're out, you can buy some stuff for the costume. I know that a lot of times when I'm at Target or Goodwill or something, I see a perfect jacket that I can, turn into, or just contribute to the costume that I have. I think that's great. So having it in front of your face, having a dream board, having any kind of like inspiration right in front of you is so important. I also like to have, just all the images that I need before I start a project, because a lot of times when you're doing a costume that has armor, it looks different from page to page. Or screen grab, because a lot of times artists, they change the look of the armor. So you have to keep in mind which armor set you want to do. A lot of times in the back of a character, they change the strapping for an armor set, and you're like, hold on, I did not account for that strapping. So you definitely want to make sure that you have enough reference materials. I'm talking about a lot of costumes, I've even had folders of hundreds of pages of reference photos, and I don't think that's abnormal to have. So having more reference materials in front of you on your phone, printed out, I think that is gold, definitely gold. And I keep all my reference photos in a folder. For me to get inspired to work on something, I have to make it fun. I am a strong believer in making everything look fun for me, because if I'm working and my surroundings kind of feel like restricting, like visually, what I mean by that is that it doesn't look fun for me. And if my area is not clean, it's really hard for me to focus. So that's another thing. Cleaning up your area, making sure everything is easy to find, like super easy to find within arm's reach. I think that's important. Cleaning up your area, making sure you have all the reference photos, making sure that you know how much money is going into what, planning it out, just being really, really meticulous before you start any project is a godsend, because seriously, if you have everything set, you can mentally get to the point where you actually start. So for me, one of my favorite projects that I ever did was I made a Gundam costume. So for me to get inspired, you don't have to do this, but I buy clear files. So these are some of my favorite clear files. You don't have to buy these. You can just go to, if you guys have a Daiso, which is a Japanese dollar store, or you can go to Target, buy colored files. For me, I like to use these ones because these are about like $1 or $2 or $3, and they look really cute. And they're usually for projects that I'm working on right away. And they get me really excited to look through them because it's some of my favorite characters in anime or whatever. And it's even better if you can find a clear file that is something that's pertaining to the character that you're doing. I know that's kind of impossible for a lot of people, but this really gets me in the mood of making costumes. So this one is a Gundam file. And this one has all of the, paper backlog of everything I did for my Gundam costume. These are all my notes, and I keep it all in this file. This can usually keep up to 50 pages, so it's pretty great. And it has like a little area that can separate, my next steps and everything. It's really awesome. Like I said, you don't have to buy these clear files. It's kind of like out there, but I always like to show you guys how I do things because for me to be able to get inspired is that I'm a very visual person. So I always like to have everything in front of me. So if you take anything from this panel, having it in front of you is very, very important. And please remember to keep that inspiration alive somehow, because day to day we might forget it. So, I'm guilty of it too. So as long as you have it on your phone, have it in front of your face, making a dream board, it's definitely the way to go. So the thing is, I also have to recommend, definitely using a folder to sketch out every single thing that you're going to be using for your build is very important. Because I think that once you sketch it out, you'll have a better idea of how things are going to work in order. So I definitely recommend checking out YouTube or looking at guides on how to make things. RPF is a very, very important place for armor builds and also people that love to make armor. I really like going on YouTube to check how other people make things because it gets me really inspired to start on armor. I think that as long as you know that there's no one specific way to do something, that's number one, because there's no way that anyone can just do it the same way. I think when you're making costumes, you're always meant to learn from your mistakes. And I think that for me, the best ways I've ever learned is messing up and redoing. Out of, I would say, my 18 years of making costumes here and there, I've learned so much just by making mistakes. So I have to really push that, especially for people that are just starting out in this hobby. It could be very intimidating a lot of times because once you mess up, you don't want to continue sometimes because it's just labor and time intensive and expensive. But I would strongly recommend taking a step back, reevaluating everything. And then, like a week later, a month later, it doesn't really matter. It's up to you. And then coming back to the project when you're ready. I think that taking your time is so important for any armor costume because I really, really strongly believe don't rush yourself. If there is anything I like to emphasize is that when you find a project that you're super in love with, you don't really want to rush that unless you have a deadline like a convention or something. But if you choose a costume that's armored, you definitely want to make sure that you're doing enough, research and putting all your love into something that you want to eventually be proud of, right? So I think that taking your time is so important. More about the folders. The thing is I've seen a lot of people actually place folders on their wall and they'll tack it on their walls and make sure that every time they finish a pattern, they'll put the pattern into the folder so they don't lose their pattern. And I thought that was such a genius idea. So during any kind of project, I think having a magnetic board is important too. If you have enough money and if you know that you're going to be always making costumes, investing in a magnetic board and just hanging everything like such as inspiration and folders that way you don't have to ruin your walls, that definitely helps a lot with armor making. So more about talking about like money, I think that is like a big thing. I've been emphasizing that since the beginning of this video, but you know, a lot of times people say, oh, you have to use this certain material. You don't have to use a certain material that people recommend. I just want to emphasize that because it really depends on your budget. So we're going to be talking about that in the next video, but I really wanted to kind of tell you guys, like, if you want to do anything with armor, make sure you just know that it's something that you love, number one. Number two, something that you're passionate about, you know, like that you really want to work on. And something that is very important to me, will I learn anything new from this project? If it's your first time ever making a costume, an armor costume, just know that there's going to be a million things you're going to learn. So that's already fun, especially if you're a crafter, like, or a person that just likes to make stuff and, you know, have fun. And of course, most importantly, you know, try not to stress. I know that it's hard to just say that and believe it, but you really have to remember why you're doing this project. It's for fun. It's definitely something that you should take in stride day by day and remind yourself, if this is an investment, I want to have a good time. So as long as you remember that, you will be much happier throughout, you know, your whole armor making process. So I really can't wait for the next video, but I hope that this inspires you guys to take the big leap. So I can't wait to talk in my next video about materials.